Farmers around Europe are taking to the streets on their tractors. They're angry because they can no longer make a living producing food. What can lawmakers do to stem the growing discontent? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, we all need food to live, but the farmers who produce it say they can no longer make a living. Why has the situation gotten so bad, and what are the solutions?
Tractors on the roads to Paris. It's an unusual sight that these farmers hope will get the government's attention.
What we want is to be able to make a living from our profession. We are fed up with all this agri-business that is gorging itself on our back.
From France across to Romania, there have been similar demonstrations. The rising cost of fuel and grain has cut margins for farmers. In Germany, a diesel subsidy was due to expire, while the EU subsidies have come with strings. The European Union's Green Deal calls for reductions in fertiliser use and nitrogen emissions, which farmers say will decrease yields. But agriculture contributes more than 10% of the EU's overall greenhouse gas emissions, mostly in the form of methane and nitrous oxide. To appease French farmers, the new Prime Minister pledged to freeze taxes on diesel and cut red tape. Right-wing politicians are seizing the opportunity as elections loom across the continent.
The Prime Minister said he was going to relieve farmers. They have been in power for 7 years. Why didn't they do it? Why are they waiting to have farmers dying by suicide every other day?
Emotions are certainly running high. This truck carrying foreign produce is set on fire and then overturned, and the Mona Lisa received an unexpected makeover. But with so many competing priorities, can policymakers find a compromise that leaves everyone happy?
Earlier I spoke to Guillaume Dumoulin. He runs an organic industrial hemp farm in eastern France. And I began by asking him what's making people across the agricultural sector in France so very angry.
Today, anger is very strong in France. There are more than 5,200 tractors heading to Paris. More than 10,000 farmers are already fighting in this agricultural crisis, in this struggle to defend their profession, to defend all the demands they may have around their work and the income from their work. The crisis is very strong at the moment, and it risks getting worse. State services are also afraid of it spreading into other industries, and the support of the population is very strong. There are over 89% of the French population who support the farmers' movement. The first problem is that of agricultural income.
And Guillaume, tell me, what's the main problem and what do you think is the solution?
This is not the only problem. There are lots of difficulties to resolve in the current agricultural model, but the question today, which triggered this enormous crisis, an unprecedented crisis in France in terms of rural and agricultural struggle, indeed, it is the first time that there has been such a big crisis. Well, it's the question of income. French farmers consider that they are not paid a fair price for their work because their production costs have increased enormously, and the cooperatives, manufacturers, processors and large retailers no longer adequately remunerate this value chain. And farmers are the basis and the crucial link within this chain. It's difficult to predict and to know the outcome of this crisis since we are at the beginning of it, and we cannot imagine today, with the determination of French farmers, what could end up happening.
So, Guillaume, who's going to win this battle between the farmers and the French government?
What we can note, which is very important, is that the French government is now under pressure. All industrial players are under pressure, particularly in relation to imports from foreign countries and intra-European imports. It's difficult to know what the outcome of this crisis will be, since next Thursday there will be a European Commission meeting and decisions will be made. The Mercosur Treaty must also be called into question on the free trade of foodstuffs. A report also came out today on imports of chicken from Ukraine in 2023, which has considerably weakened the poultry industry in France. So today we're seeing a systemic crisis, a structural crisis, and all the key players must gather around the table. And the citizens too. Consumers must become aware of the nature of this crisis, since it's our food that is at stake. But it's also the GDP and all French income at stake here. It's the entire economy of Europe, since we are the leading agricultural country in Europe. It's obvious that this crisis is part of a specific agenda.
Well, let's meet our guests. Helen O'Sullivan is a co-founder and leader of the Farmers Alliance political party in Ireland. It describes itself as a grassroots organisation that is building a movement of farmers as well as rural and urban communities. She joins us from West Cork. Jos Ubels is in Anderen in the Netherlands. He's the vice president of the Farmers Defence Force and is also a cattle farmer. And joining me from Paris is the journalist Alexis Poulin, co-founder of Le Monde Moderne media. Welcome to all of you. Helen, I'll nail my colours to the mast first of all. My father's family are a farming family from North County Longford in Ireland. Just tell us, what do you think the French are doing? Do you believe the French farmers have a point with all of these protests?
Yes, I do. I travelled to Brussels recently to meet the French farmers that came to the European Parliament in Brussels, where they protested. I do feel for them. I feel it's not just the French farmers, unfortunately. It's a lot of farmers in the EU, including ourselves here in Ireland, Germany, Spain, different parts. But I think the French farmers are right in what they're doing, because they cannot sit down any longer and take what is coming to them. We do feel there's an awful lot of anti-farming practices coming from the EU, which is preventing us from doing the job we do so well, and that is farming and producing sustainable food and wine.
Jos, it's a difficult life, the life of a farmer. I've seen firsthand the hours people put in, the relentless work. You never get a holiday. You are tied to the land, tied to the farm. Do you think the purchasing public actually understand just how much work goes into that pint of milk appearing in the supermarket? How much work goes into that beef or whatever product appearing on a supermarket shelf?
Well, I think the majority doesn't, and you can't blame them for that, because they were not raised within farms. If you look at the Netherlands, farming is just done by a minority. We have less than 50,000 farmers in a country with almost 18 million people. So there is not a lot of people that know a farmer from nearby. So yeah, people get far away from farming as a profession.
And Jos, give us a feel for the amount of anger in the farming community in the Netherlands with what's going on, the working hours, the pay, the paperwork being inflicted upon you by the EU.
Well, actually, you're talking about hard working and the little pay, but this was never a problem. Farmers is a way of living, and they work many hours, but they do this because they feel that this is the profession that is their life. And for that reason, the emotions and the stakes are high. And you ask about the anger of the farmers, but I worry more about the farmers being so negative about their profession and their future. The suicide rates in the Netherlands are sky high amongst farmers, and this is something whole of the Netherlands should be scared about.
Well, Jos, just on that issue of suicide in the farming community, let's take a look at these statistics. In France, the difficulties experienced by farmers has been blamed for a significantly higher suicide rate than the wider population. In 2020, the rate of suicide among farmers aged 15 to 64 was 43.2% higher than the national average. That's according to figures compiled by the Mutuelle Sociale Agricole, MSA. That's the agricultural sector's main health insurance provider. Shocking statistics. Alexis, I just want to come to you. Just tell us, What level of anger are you seeing across rural France with the way all of this is going?
I think that there is a lot of anger, and it's been boiling for quite a while now, because we have also a suicide rate in the profession of farmers, an anger against Brussels and all the legislation being very difficult for French farmers, and also the fact that French politicians have never really cared about the farming communities, and now it's a bit too late. So they decided to block the country, block several motorways, and going up to Paris as well to discuss with the new Prime Minister Gabriel Attal, because Emmanuel Macron was away in India at the beginning of the week, and now is in Sweden for the end of the week. So there is a lot of anger, but also clearly a plan to change the rules, because I think this farmer movement is international, and there is one target, and of course this is the EU.
Alexis, is there a feeling in France that your country is run by metropolitan elites who are so far removed from rural French life that they just don't understand how hard people work on farms? French produce is famous the world over. I mean, you are world leaders at what you do. And do you feel there's a disjoint almost between rural communities and the likes of Macron and Attal, who in all honesty will never do a day's work on a farm in their lives?
Yeah, it's not a feeling, it's a fact. Gabriel Attal spent all of his life in Paris, in the small Saint-Germain-des-Prés. So when he goes and meet with rural French and the real France, it's a shock, or it's really something far from his daily life. Same for Emmanuel Macron and also others. The problem is not only the elite, it's the fact that there is a policy, and amongst all the elite, which is to kill the farming community slowly but surely, to make sure that France is an in-debt country, buying products from abroad, but not selling so much, and not producing locally for local consumers. And I think this is the same in the rest of Europe. We've seen in the Netherlands, in Belgium, we've seen in Ireland and everywhere. The fact that this globalization went too far.
Helen, you're in West Cork, beautiful part of Ireland. Just give us a view of your daily working life. What time you get up, how much work you do. What is life like on the farm?
Yes, well, at the moment, it's a very busy time on the farm. I'm a circular farmer, so we're in calving season at the moment. I've been up twice during the night, up at 2 o'clock, up at 4:30. I got up again at 6 o'clock, so very long working hours. You know, we don't get weekends off or you know, holidays. We have to work 24/7, especially during the calving season. You know, we have to ensure those calves are up and sucking within an hour or two. We have to bed them, we have to check the other cows, we have to feed them. There's some days here I would not leave the farm from one day to the next. And I feel there's no respect at all given to the farmer. We work very hard, you know, and we don't mind doing all the long hours, as it was mentioned earlier on, but we just want a bit of respect shown to us. Here in Ireland, we produce the most sustainable, nutrient-dense quality food in the whole world, you know, in there. So I think we should be shown a bit of respect for this. These anti-farming policies coming from the EU are nothing just to stop the farmers, to keep us down in the name of green ideology, which doesn't make sense. Just to give you an example, for Ireland to produce 1 kg of meat here, we only produce about, you know, 9 or 10 kgs of carbon. Whereas if that 1 kg of meat was produced in Brazil, they're creating up to 1,000 kgs of carbon. So it doesn't make sense to close us down and let the people in Brazil cut down the Amazon forest, our world's lungs, to produce this meat when we can do it very sustainably here. Same with the dairy farmers. There's an order after coming out from the EU for us to cull our national herd of 200,000 cows, which in effect is actually 400,000 animals, because these cows are heavily pregnant. Now, the question I have to ask is climate change only happening in Ireland and Europe? Because China continue to build their fire-powered fossil fuel plant every week. They're laughing at us. The whole world is laughing at us here in Europe. Ireland's global emissions are less than 0.01%. whereas China's emissions are 30.9%. They continue on as if nothing's happening, but we, the people in Europe, are being penalised for producing quality, sustainable food, and it's not fair or good enough. And that is why we, the farmers in Europe, have to come together. Like I say, I and a colleague of mine was in Brussels recently for the protest, the French farmers that came up there to protest for their livelihoods. And we are going to form an alliance with these other EU countries so that we can come together and be one strong voice to fight back to these anti-farming policies.
Thanks, Helen. Jos, I want to ask you about subsidies. A lot of people think farmers get really well looked after, but the reality is you put in extraordinary long hours, really, really difficult days, weather, all types of climate. It's a tough life, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, it's a tough life. But the problem is not that if you talk about subsidies, you talk about money that's given by the European Union for certain things we have to do on the farm that sometimes are acceptable, but sometimes are also very weird to do on your farm because they are not changes for the better. They are changes for the worse. And they are not bringing any profit for the nature or the environment or any profit for the farmer. So they are just being subsidized by the government. And when the people, when the civilians ask me about, you get a lot of subsidies, yeah? You're a farmer, you should be happy with that. You get money from the government for your work. And I always say, but you have to think twice because the money we get is actually not money for us. This is the money so that we can keep the food in the shops affordable. It's not the farmers are not subsidized. It's the food in the shop that is subsidized. And that's why it's so awful to see and hear as a young farmer that they are opposing so many rules on us as farmers that are not bringing any changes for the better, only for the worse. But we are producing in a kind of way that is good for climate. We are on the top 5 of the world in the Netherlands, but we are consuming, the Dutch people are consuming products that are not allowed to produce all in Europe. So I thought it's a bit weird and unfair if you can't produce it here, that you can consume it. So I should say that the European Union should protect the farmers more, and then they can also be treated fair inside of the European Union, because now they have the threat of the government and the European Union, and they also have the threat of the imports from elsewhere.
Alexis, there's a common theme here. The European Union is getting mentioned a lot. And I've read that French farmers are equally very angry with the mountains of paperwork that are being afflicted upon them by the EU.
True, and that's part of the mobilization, saying that EU has gone too far in trying to control the work of farmers, and all that also coming from this climate agenda, all the new taxes on fuel and the difficulty of producing, be it meat or cereals or anything, to fit with the carbon agenda, which has nothing to do with the farming work. And also they are very aware of the cycle of nature and all that. And I think technocracy is going mad. There is a point where there is no return, and the farmers are this point saying enough. We have to stop being that mad. We have to come back to earth and to the people who really work and make sure that we can eat and make sure that we can produce with fair legislation, but not with technocracy and not with more taxes, because this is what has been happening for years. And now we have a situation in Europe where we are losing our farmers because of despair, but also because of the economy and the fact that this sector is not made for a living.
And Alexis, I want to talk about social media in France, because we've seen so many of the protests and the stunts that the young farmers have carried out, getting a lot of traction on TikTok and Instagram and X, Twitter. I mean, how much support is that garnering for the cause, all of this social media exposure?
I mean, so far the public support is very high, and even despite that they are blocking motorways and roads, people understand what farmers are doing. Even the interior minister doesn't want to be violent with the farmers, explaining that they have to express their anger and make sure that everything is happening clearly. But, and there is a but, you have some journalists in France trying to pretend that the movement is infiltrated by Russian trolls and foreign influencer to make sure that there is mayhem in France. Clearly not. This is a movement that is a grassroots movement coming from French farmers. And of course, social media can help passing through the mainstream media that don't want to show all of what is happening in the regions.
Helen, this is a big year in Ireland. We will have a general election. We may very well have a change of government, also European elections in May. Just give us an idea of the strength of support you're starting to feel towards the farmers and their cause.
Yes, I think at last people are finally seeing what the farmers are being put through, what disrespect is put towards us, especially our national media outlets here in Ireland, in that they are putting out misinformation about farmers, and that is causing a huge divide between rural and urban dwellers. We're being made out to look like, you know, the big bad wolves and all of climate change, but we're not. We are the most sustainable producers of good food in the whole of Europe, and I would go as far as to say in the world. So we're getting an awful lot of positive feedback, especially from people living in Dublin City, Cork City and Galway. And this is very overwhelming to see, you know, the appreciation they have of good quality food that we produce. Like, there was one message left for us on our website where they said, you know, I'm not a farmer, but I need a farmer 3 times a day. We're behind you 100%. So I thought that was lovely. It's very reassuring. We're getting a lot of good comments. People are asking us, have we candidates in every part of the country, because they want to support us. They see how we're being treated. They see where their food comes from. They too now understand that this green ideology coming from our country and from Europe doesn't make sense, you know, to close down like our horticultural sector here in Ireland, and then start importing that from Latvia. I think we imported over 4,000 tons of peat from Latvia. So that doesn't really make sense at all. We're importing wood chip from Brazil and briquettes from Germany. So all of these measures don't make sense in the name of climate change if they're trying to stop producing it here and then import it in from somebody else. The carbon footprint of that is huge. So it really doesn't make sense to me. And, you know, unfortunately, there's a lot of labels being put out there at the moment now. You know, if you don't agree with something, you know, there's labels called, you know, right or far right. But, you know, that comes back to us a lot. And I suppose the one answer we always give them is, you know, we don't have a label, but if you want to put a label on us, it is a common sense label. We just want a common sense approach. We want our country back to the way it was. And that is, you know, keeping people in employment and, you know, providing this sustainable, nutrient-dense food for our people and the people of Europe.
And Helen, supermarket bosses have been left out of this conversation. What would you say to them now? You know, these are the leaders who squeeze farmers, squeeze suppliers, constantly pay low prices. What would you say to any supermarket bosses out there who happen to be watching, who really should be paying more for what farmers produce?
This is a very important point. You know, customers have come up to me when I'm in town and they can't understand how we are getting so little for our produce and how the customer has to pay so much. There's a huge gap between what we get paid and what they have to pay. So I think it's time now that the retailers, you know, come to the table, sit down and realise what pressure they're putting us under. For example, the vegetable growers here in Ireland, they're nearly obsolete because of the restrictions they have to go through, of how they keep pushing them down price-wise, looking for the best price, you know, for the customer, but yet giving the farmer pittance. And that's not just with the vegetable farmers, it's with the beef farmer, the dairy farmer, the tillage farmer. You know, we're all being pushed down the whole time so that the retailer can get it for a good price and then sell it on to the consumer, you know. So it's not good enough. We need to have an all-round table discussion with the producer, the processor and the retailer, because the gap is way too big between what the producer gets and what the retailer is getting and what the customer has to pay for that product.
Alexis, if these protests go on for a few months more, we will be very close to France welcoming the world to the Olympic Games in July and August and the Paralympic Games. Is there a fear that French farmers could start blockading those events?
Not only French farmers, but for example, we had the Parisian metro workers who are ready to block if necessary, and other corporation and workers are ready to block. But you know that the farmers won't be able to spend months on the roads. I mean, they have to take care of their work and their farms, and the government knows that very well. So it's a limit to the movement. But clearly, the Olympic Games could be the moment where everyone in France could use this worldwide TV moment to show what is going badly in France and to make sure that people are aware of it.
Helen, Jos and Alexis, thank you all for your insight. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World, and if you like what you've just watched, hit that subscribe button. But for now, from me and Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.